Welcome to Mac and Blue, the cutting-edge podcast for the nation's builders, merging the realms of construction with exciting advancements in technology. Join us on a thrilling journey where we delve into the dynamic world of blockchain, AI, the metaverse, virtual and augmented reality, and their transformative impact on the industry. Our engaging discussions span a wide spectrum, covering not only construction, economic development, supply chain, and market segments, but also exploring the vibrant tapestry of diversity within the construction landscape. We shed light on the intersection of local politics and its profound influence on the construction sector, while championing the remarkable contributions of women and minorities in construction. For all things Mac and Blue, head to www.macandblue.com, and don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. I'm your host, JJ Levinsky. Now let's get into it. Hi everyone, welcome to Mac and Blue. I'm your host, JJ Levinsky, president and co-founder of Blue Wave General Contracting. Today, I'm lucky enough to have Lee Adam, who is the manager of product marketing at Cardata. Full disclosure, Lee reached out to me, and she must have been spying on something cool because of this podcast. Very interesting, as most people know on the Mac and Blue platform, we're all about building the future, and it takes on many avenues and many perspectives. And I think this was a very appropriate or apropos type thing where Lee reached out to me. I did some spying on her, their organization, what they had done, and in the space of, if you want to call it advocacy for change and things like that, and how people are implementing on tech, AI, BI, all those acronyms that we throw around so loosely, seems like a very appropriate thing. So, Lee, welcome. And I look forward to getting into some nuts and bolts. Before we do that, let me, if I can, I usually don't like to read, but in this case, I'm going to give everyone a little bit of your bio. Lee, if I can put some dots together here. Lee has been, her educational background is Bachelor of Commerce from the Queen's University, assuming that's in Canada, eh? And then, come on, that was funny. And then also University of Economics in Austria. So she's multicultural and very diverse. So with that, one other thing is Lee has also been recognized on multiple features in esteemed publications, Automotive Fleet Magazine, Forbes, U.S. Business News, and Fleet Management Weekly. So she is a voice to be reckoned with, and we'll listen to her intently today. So, hey, before we get started, though, we have to ask the obvious question. Who's your hockey team?
Oh, geez. That's a tough one. That hurts me at this time of year to ask, but I've got to go painfully with the Ottawa Senators, despite there being no reason to cheer for them.
At least you're not a Leafs fan.
I know. You're right. I wouldn't want to be a Leafs fan even on their best days.
Yeah, a Toronto girl, and you're not a Leafs fan. Now, full disclosure, by the time this airs, who knows where the hockey playoffs will be? But yeah, it was you had to take the Toronto fans had to take one a tough one the other night. But all right, so Lee, let's just start. Explain to the audience. Let's take some baby steps and just lay the groundwork of what is Cardata and what's the space that you're in. And how did it all start? Or you could put those in any order, but just give a baseline and a platform for the audience to relate to the rest of our conversation today.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, JJ. So we'll take a step back here and look at this from a really top level, so to speak. Cardata is an organization that focuses on optimizing mobility for teams who drive for work. So particularly in the construction space, we know that, contractors, foremen, site managers, project managers spend a ton of time on the road for work. And what Cardata does is it optimizes that experience. So typically what that means is replacing outdated methods or outdated alternatives to be mobile or to drive for work. So Cardata is essentially a fully managed, tax-free, automated vehicle reimbursement platform that essentially removes the burden associated with driving and getting paid to drive for work. So we replace company cars, we replace taxable car allowances and other inefficient methods of driving for work with a really seamless, modern digital approach to ensure that all of the employees that are driving for work have fair reimbursements, competitive reimbursements, and are fully experiencing their work-life burden-free. That's what Cardata does. in terms of our history and how the heck we got here, Cardata was actually founded in 1999. So we've been around for a while, a really rich history coming from a family business. And we were recapitalized in 2019. And we've been through a couple kind of venture capitalist cycles, so to speak. And 2019 was a really big foundational year for us where we made a lot of changes. We had, at that point, years of experience and market data in our base, but we wanted to take a go at our technology and be at the forefront of technological development for a really unsung industry, so to speak. Like if I say vehicle reimbursement, I'm sure that doesn't get everybody, excited, right? It's very undersaturated. So we wanted to improve our technology. So we went through a couple acquisitions, and we're now at the place where we're building our technology to really be industry leading, to become in line with who we are as an organization, which is, very service led, very fully managed, to help make sure that nobody really has to experience any challenges with driving for work in the modern age.
So are those, if I can interject then, Lee, what in defining vehicle programs, is there basically just two? It's either reimbursement or non-reimbursement, or are there other outliers out there? In other words, as the listeners are trying to kind of, connect the dots with you, is there just two options basically anymore?
Amazing question, JJ. If you ask me that, or ask anybody that 10 years ago, they'd probably say, yeah, there's two options. But in today's day and age, what we typically see, particularly in the construction industry, and, there's alternatives in others, but most common that we see, we'll say there's four. First and foremost, you got your company vehicles. So whether they're leased by the organization or owned, more so owned, that's those cars or the trucks that are owned by the company that they say, hey, Joe Smith, here's your car, go to the site, good luck. Put your stuff in it and get on going. So that's the first. Company car is very common. I'm sure, I don't know, JJ, if you've ever had a company car through your experience.
Maybe once or twice, yeah.
Yeah, me too. And, they come with their own pros and cons, of course. But that's typically a common one. The second most common one is typically those time-consuming receipt or mileage submissions. So an employee might be driving to a site, they're tracking their mileage by hand. They might go into their internal system and submit for, the IRS standard rate per mile, which in 2024 is 67 cents per mile. Or they might, submit a gas receipt. Very common, time-consuming, challenging, of course. And then the third option there is the flat allowance. I'm sure some of your listeners have experienced situations in which they sign on to a company and they say, hey, you're going to get like a $700, $600 a month flat allowance. Here you go. It's on your pay stub. Great. Sounds lovely. But that's actually very heavily taxable. 30%, if not up to 38% across the employer and the employee contribution, FICA, income, all these things. So now the fourth option is when we get to this modern digital space, right? This more exciting area where you can actually pursue what's typically called an accountable plan or accountable allowance, tax-free car allowance plan, in which you can reimburse employees on the road completely tax-free and actually using technology and market data to ensure that not only are you reimbursing fairly, but you're reimbursing in an accountable method. And that's what Cardata does. That's the fourth option. The most common approach is called a fixed and variable rate reimbursement plan, which is, favr, so to speak. It's really the most widely used approach for many organizations, particularly in construction, who are pursuing.
That's the common acronym out there is favr, FAVR, correct?
You got it. FAVR. Okay. That's the most common acronym.
Okay. So yeah. I'm glad you pronounced it as favor instead of fav or favra, or, for all you Packer fans out there. Brett Favre, yeah.
Not Favre. I've seen that. I've actually heard that on calls with clients, so they say, "Oh, Favre," and I'm like, "Oh, I don't know if you want to say that." but no, favor. It's favor's interesting, JJ, because it's misconstrued. It's an acronym. People don't love that. It's not very easy to perhaps absorb on face value, but it's widely considered the most fair approach, and here's why. It's essentially a strategy that leverages both geographical and vehicle-specific information that might influence a person's driving expenses, and it creates a rate for them using that data. So it mines fuel data, it mines location data, it mines data with regards to the type of vehicle that the employer requires their employee to be in, and it accurately is paired with technology that allows us to capture mileage data and actual business use data of a vehicle so that we can adequately reimburse for the cost of driving at cost. So because we're using data and we're using mileage tracking, when you pair that together, the IRS says, great, you're using data to reimburse at cost. It looks like there's no tax here. So we're able to reimburse the fixed portion, which is the ownership costs of the vehicle that is related to business use, and the variable portion, which is the operating expenses related to vehicle use. So the mileage costs, the fuel, the maintenance, all these things that go up as you drive more. So when we take the fixed costs and the variable costs, we add them together, we're reimbursing exactly what the employee needs. That's why it's really considered the most fair option. And you don't have to pay all that crappy taxes that we see so many people paying for so many years and then going back and saying, oh, shoot, I could have done this 5 years ago. So it's really the magic medium to keep employees happy and keep employers' pockets tight, so to speak.
So is it fair to say that Cardata got into the space basically on the back of like construction fleet? Did I hear you kind of say that basically the backbone of Cardata was typically in the construction space because there's so many, think of all the service industries that are related to construction as far as all the service vans and tech vans and trucks and things of that. Did I hear that correctly?
It's partially true, JJ, because the construction vertical, it's not just one, right? You've got like residential, industrial, commercial, and typically, it's interesting, the use case for doing or pursuing an accountable reimbursement model, I say that with air quotes, the use case for pursuing that and to say, okay, employees, you drive for work and we want to pay you fairly for that and make sure you don't leave and we keep our skilled workers, but we also want to keep our pockets tight. We want to make sure we're not wasting any money. That's a very widely applicable use case. So typically, actually, for Cardata, we serve a really wide range of industries. For example, CPG is huge. Sales reps on the road, they do a lot of driving too. Perhaps different types of driving than construction, but they do a lot. That's a big one. Oil and gas is another, tangential industry as well. Medical device, very, very huge, right? So there's a really wide use case for this, but typically in the construction space, we're seeing a shift, and I think JJ can probably provide more context to this as well, but we're seeing a shift to increase, digitization and wanting to have better financial monitoring, which is kind of why we reached out initially, is because there's really a gap in the space, particularly if we're talking about driving for work. Most common vehicle program type in construction is company trucks. That's really the most common, but we've had so many transitions over the past year simply because organizations will come to us and say, okay, like our employees love their trucks, but they're not really loving their trucks so much anymore when we can't get new trucks. We can't source new trucks. The trucks are very expensive for us to manage. And, we had this big accident and we can't handle it anymore. So what do we do? And there's this desire to turn to flexible technology solutions that help them scale faster, but also keep their employees happy by being like, okay, we can offer this tax-free reimbursement so our people stay happy and they're getting a good benefit and we don't have to lose our good talent. So I think that's really the reason why construction has been such a focus lately.
There comes a time when dreams become a reality, when you see your vision materialize into a true work of art. And the only way to get there is to choose a general contractor who shares that same vision and knows how to bring it to life. At Blue Wave, we aren't so big that we've forgotten where we've come from, and we aren't so small that we can't care for your projects regardless of their size. When your vision deserves safety, perfection, timeliness, and expertise in order to become a reality, trust Blue Wave to get it done right the first time.
Fair enough. I'll go down a bunch of tangents here, Lee. So let's go back to the data collection. Is for most people that have a fleet, they may be used to I call it a fob or something that plugs into the vehicle's computer. Are you doing that, or is it primarily done exclusively on the employee's app that's on their smartphone, or both?
Yeah. So glad that you asked that. So if you think tracking today, your brain probably goes to telematics, which is like those ugly plugins that you have to put in your car that follow you around all the time. Yeah, that's I don't blame you for thinking about that at all. That would be what we would typically consider in our space an outdated approach, because it's hardware focused, right? It's super common that those approaches are paired with company cars because they're like, hey, you already have my hard asset. You have this, clunk of metal that could cost me $100K to fix, so you have to put this in your car. Whereas the Cardata approach is a software approach, meaning we don't require employees to carry a device in their vehicle, that they have to plug in that is privacy challenged or makes them feel uncomfortable or has any issue of getting broken, for example, or is going to cost the company any more money. We have a solution that is able to be integrated with an employee's personal or company provided cell phone in an app format. So we use GPS tracking to make sure that employees can capture their mileage essentially automatically, but without the need to worry about a hardware device in their car because, gosh, nobody likes that.
Okay. So you did answer my question. It's more on the app side than the hardware side. Okay. So where do you want, Lee, do you want to go to use cases, or do you want to go through the actual, I'm going to ask you, do we go down the use cases so the audience can relate, or do you want to go in the technical and tactical matter of how you typically will onboard with someone and how it applies, or do you want to go back and forth between the two?
Great question. I think maybe if we want to go, if we start in like why you would do this, like pros and cons of
sure, go. Sure.
Fleet. And then after that, if we want to go to how to make the transition, I think that's a good question. Very commonly people are like, I want to do this, but how the heck do I get people to buy in to do it? I think that works.
And I think then Lee in the background, keep in mind, return on investment or the financial modeling of all this, because everyone that might be interested in this are going to go, okay, Lee, that's great, but how does it benefit me? How does it benefit us? So just in the back of your mind, subconsciously, always kind of think like how, as you go through maybe some use cases or examples, you don't have to mention names. You can keep it ambiguous, if you will, but just kind of always think about that, because think of like what the audience would want to ask you next.
Yeah, awesome. I have some numbers I can share as well. So
okay,
that helps.
So go ahead, tell some stories.
Awesome. Okay, great. So it's funny. A lot of the times when people are thinking or companies are making the journey through, do I pursue a reimbursement model? The first question that is asked often is, do I pursue a personal vehicle model? Because typically the biggest shift is, all right, I've got a fleet of, fully depreciated, banged up F-150s that I want to get rid of, or I have a, no fleet of cars and I need a fleet because I can't procure vehicles. How and when do I consider the switch? So to provide a little bit of a context to the company-owned vehicle space, there's some really strong pros and cons that I would encourage people to consider before approaching the switch. In terms of pros, ultimately, for many construction organizations, their cars are a form of branding. It's something that's often associated with the brand. Sometimes they come rigged. Of course, that's challenging to adjust. And we talked a little bit about telematics, which some people love. Like some organizations say, oh, I need to be able to have a plug-in and never allow my employee to take it out, right? So those are a couple pros of keeping this approach. But in terms of cons, often, those pros are not necessarily weighed against the negatives associated with the cost burden, the liability burden, in addition to the administrative burden of these programs. So I'll give you an example. Typically, company car fleet, company truck fleet, whatever, compared to its direct equal in the personal vehicle reimbursement model is typically 30% inflated. We can probably assume why, right? There's an element of the personal use that's being included in the cost of a company car given to JJ, for example, to drive every single day and to drive on the weekend and to drive his kids around, which is valid, of course. But there's also an overinflation of fuel payment that we're seeing and an overinflation of depreciation and all of these elements. So typically 1-to-1 is 30%. A leased vehicle, fleet of around 50 cars could cost somebody over $800,000 a year. Could cost an organization over $800. Its equivalent in mileage reimbursement could be closer to $400,000. It could be closer to $500,000, depending on the type of vehicle that you're reimbursing on. So there's a big financial incentive for organizations to decide or decipher, like, okay, I need to cut my costs. I need to streamline my finances, but I don't want to get rid of people because it's a challenging environment and I actually need more labor. I need more bodies and I need to get more jobs done. So how are other ways I can streamline? Trimming the fat on your fleet program is not a bad idea to start, especially when you can do the job and pay really fairly using a personal vehicle approach. The other element there is the risk. I had a company I was talking to, it was a construction company. It's funny. Last year came to me and they said, okay, Lee, we've had it. Like, I had a guy come in who totaled his vehicle and it was branded and it cost us not only, $50,000 in damages to his car and the other person's car, but also like it's a PR challenge, right? We just can't do it anymore. We need to find an alternative. So that risk element, it's hard to quantify until something's happened where you're squirming and you're like, oh shoot, I need to come up with an alternative, right? So a lot of people are really moving this direction to reduce not only the cost, but the liability and the goodwill associated with operating programs that aren't accountable and potentially are challenging for the workforce. So those are some really key reasons. The one other thing I'll say is with fleet organizations and fleet cars, there's typically a cultural element there, where employees will say, oh, I love my car, I love my truck, I need it. And that's hard to navigate, right? It's hard to make the switch unless the switch is something that is going to be effective for the organization. So I would encourage companies to really look closely at their cost goals, look closely at their current exposure and liability, and also look closely at their supply chain and whether or not they're struggling to procure cars, whether or not they're struggling to actually have accurate data on what's going on with their trucks, right? Like, do you know if people are using your trucks appropriately? Are you looking at your cost data at all? What financial monitoring and benchmarks and KPIs do you have in place to actually know if you're spending at that goal or if you're over-indexing for the year, right? So I really encourage organizations to do those internal audits and then also work with partners that can help them to really compare and make good choices depending on what their KPIs are and their decisions with regards to how they want to support their employees and keep them happy and satisfied.
Can you think, Lee, of, again, without mentioning names, can you walk us through a transition of a company that signed up with you that may have been on one of the traditional models, or maybe you can have multiple examples and just walk through the process and give kind of what the results were, the feedback that you received?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll give you two. And these are actually, funny enough, back when I was in the sales game, these are a couple of my really good partners, great organizations, both in construction. The first one I had was an organization out in Texas, and they were paying a flat car allowance for their field technicians. They also had a flat car allowance for their GMs and their executives and their contractors. So they were kind of pursuing this streamlined, so to speak, approach where everybody got the same thing. And they came to us and they said, I just read an article that said I'm wasting 30%. And I did some research and I read some IRS stuff and I noticed that my people were only taking home, like $420 when I was giving them $600. So what's going on here? And we sat down together and we talked about, how we were going to be able to build something that would enable them to put that full monetary value, that full $600 into their people's pocket instead of that reduced $420, because their goal was to pay their people more. They wanted to make sure that money was hitting the pocket. So based on that goal, we sat down and we modeled out like what could a fixed and a variable rate program look like for you? What mileage thresholds would we be looking at? what car should we model it on? We sat down, we did the math together, and we strategized, and we talked about what an effective rollout would look like for a company that's never had to do any accountable-based reporting. Like, there's never been any mileage capture tool. There's never been any receipt submission. These guys are just getting $600, right? So we sat down together and developed an in-depth training plan that would make everybody feel more confident about, taking this leap and trying something new and trying something that is so data-driven. And since the transition, they have been able to save quite a bit on taxes, but they've made the choice to actually reinvest it into their employees, which is a really admirable choice for an organization to make in a time where we're supporting employees specifically with heavy degree of specialization in construction is a big focus for a lot of organizations. So that's my first story, happy ending. Second story, I had a little bit of a different use case. Yeah.
Can I interrupt you? I'm sure a lot of people that are smart with numbers are wanting to ask the question, okay, Lee, you talked about the IRS and basically what you just described was a tax avoidance is really what it comes down to. Can you go down a little bit in more granular detail on that? And because I'm going to play devil's advocate here, what happens if the IRS changes a rule or a subtle amendment to, their rules? How is Cardata able to ebb and flow with any of those changes? Because that's a huge selling point for you guys right now. But what if the IRS pivots and iterates to freeing that up? Do you lose competitive advantage at that point, or are we looking? Or if we go to the complete other end of the spectrum, all the companies that take the accelerated depreciation on their assets for that fleet and things. I want to spend a little time on the financial modeling for the smart people that will listen and watch and go, JJ, ask that question.
It's so true. We're all, I like to say everybody in the US and we're kind of all at mercy if one day the IRS decided that everything's taxable and right.
Agreed. Sorry.
No, but you know what? It's a fair question. And I will say that the IRS, all power to them. They've had the same regulations for a very long time. They have yet to come out with new regulation for electric vehicles, for example. And how long has the market come out, or how long has the market been ready to accept electric vehicles? Who knows, right? But it's been chat for like 10 years, right? So they're a little bit, shall we say, perhaps they're over-indexed and have not enough bandwidth to make a lot of the changes. But if they were to, JJ, I think, with Cardata particularly, we have 25 years of experience dealing with them directly. Close ties. We have people on the data side who are monitoring this every single day. We have a very, very robust database that's not only used for the tax benefit, of course, with regards to the IRS regulations, which we stay on top of all the time, but we also have a really robust database of what the heck everybody else is paying in the market, right? Like, what is the going rate? What is the fair cost there? So even if you were to remove one day the IRS, regulation element, which won't happen, but say that it did, there's an additional benefit there of being able to say, okay, from a benchmarking standpoint, I know where I'm playing in my industry. Like, I know where I stand versus the other construction companies that are in my area, or, the other companies in general that are in my area that are reimbursing similarly or differently. And I know where I want to play. And then also saying, I have provided my employees with a tool to get what they need extremely, extremely easily, right? I have an application that allows them to capture mileage as they're driving. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to click a submit button, right? It's fully automated. And it also gives my company the well-being and the peace of mind to say, okay, not only am I tracking insurance, tracking mileage rather, I have insurance data. I know where my employees, I know when they're hitting the site. Like, I have the analytics to say, I know that Joe Smith, got to the construction site on time. So when you pair the business intelligence with the IRS regulation, that's when you get the golden area. But if you were to strip that away one day, I think the benefit of being able to say, I'm overpaying my people because the data tells me I am, is a really good benefit for organizations to leverage.
There comes a time when dreams become a reality, when you see your vision materialize into a true work of art. And the only way to get there is to choose a general contractor who shares that same vision and knows how to bring it to life. At Blue Wave, we aren't so big that we've forgotten where we've come from, and we aren't so small that we can't care for your projects regardless of their size. When your vision deserves safety, perfection, timeliness, and expertise in order to become a reality, trust Blue Wave to get it done right the first time.
Thanks for answering that question. I cut you off though. You were going to give another use case, so if it's fresh on your mind, feel free to go down another example.
For sure. So the second is it was a funny situation. I had a company come out of Tennessee, and they, it's funny. They had company cars with telematics in the vehicle, so that essentially just means the plug-in. There's a GPS element there, and he said, I'm so sick of my employees complaining about this telematics. I'm so sick of my employees, quitting and saying, I don't want to use this, or I want to use my personal car because of the element of being monitored. And they said, we want to get away from it. We want to open an alternative option for our employees. Now, typically, we don't always suggest that our partners pursue a hybrid approach, because sometimes it's a challenge, of course. If you have multiple options, you're giving people choice, people are swaying it. There's transition costs, of course, associated with that. But they said, look, we want to give our employees an incentive to stay with us, right? We want to have the analytics that we need to have, and we need to have the control over our liability, which is why we have telematics in the first place. But we don't want our employees to feel monitored. So what can we do to enable them to feel safer with us and to feel not only safe, but that we're getting what they need? They're getting paid well. So they pursued a solution with us. We actually, from a transition management standpoint, went through a tiered approach where we kind of had them add drivers as their leases turned over, which was a really successful approach for them that really lessened the burden on the organization, made everybody feel confident that a slow transition from company leased vehicle to reimbursement model was a big success, and everybody felt more confident moving forward with that solution, and less monitored, of course.
Yeah, that was a good example. Darn it, I was going to ask you a question. You said something that it'll come back to me. So let's go back to the way we go down another path. You were talking about early on, Lee. We talked about the recapitalization of where Cardata was going and things like that, and did some research. You guys have some very smart people behind you on the board. Again with the capital investment things. What's the end goal out of the board's position right now on where you guys are transforming your technological approach? Because is it going to go to, are we going 100% generative AI to where that's going to be a huge part of what you're doing? Give the audience a little look into the spyglass of the future of Cardata and who's backing you and why right now.
It's great. Yeah, great point. And definitely a really big point of excitement for us and our team. So Cardata was lucky enough to begin business with Wavecrest, which is a really great organization who has put a lot of time and energy into our growth. And really the reason behind this is it's multifold, but typically we are in an underserved market. The amount of people that I say favor to, or I say Cardata, or I say vehicle reimbursement, and they're like, what the heck is that, is so high, which is valid, of course. And when Wavecrest came in, they said, Cardata is a company that is dedicated to removing outdated approaches to driving for work. We want to remove the inefficiencies and the cost waste and the time wasted of having these outdated programs like expensive company cars and taxable allowances and submissions. They saw us passionate about doing that. And they saw our 25 years of industry experience and said, we need to help them scale that up. So for 25 years, we've had industry-leading customer service. And that sounds like a buzzword, but for us, really, what that means is we've sat down with partners, with big logos, with small logos for 25 years, and not only designed their program that's fully IRS compliant and meets their goals, but also managed it for them as an arm of their company. as a partner that they can trust. And we need to scale so that we can further support more companies and, fortify our approach and enable our technology to be able to support that scalability. So for us in product acceleration, we want to continue to fortify our core products so that we can support further organizations long term. But we also, as you mentioned, generative AI, it's a big conversation. It's definitely a big word that's been circulating internally. So we want to continue to build understanding that we have a huge Rolodex of data that we're sitting on right now, market data specifically, that has not been leveraged. Yeah.
Yeah, because you already have the machine learning part, because a lot of people intermix AI with machine learning because they don't know the difference. But you guys have already gone down, tunnel number one. But tunnel number two is really, the companies that have the generative AI in their scope will have a distinct advantage moving forward in the next 5 to 10 years, or who knows, maybe those are being too long. Maybe it's the next 2 to 3 years, and then a whole nother, God knows what's coming after that. But I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask, because especially, that old cliche of, I'm a tech company, I just happen to solve solutions in whatever. And in your case, it's this. And, the more and more people we get on this podcast, it seems like that, not to be a copycat, but a lot of them are like, hey, at the end of the day, we're a technology company implementing solutions through X, Y, or Z. And again, my job is to make sure that I ask those questions so that other people can see, like, hey, in my vertical or in my space, how does a Cardata or how does someone equally, a SaaS-based business like yourself, how do they provide solutions that I need to become a better X, a better company, a better employer, a better culture, and what I heard you say is that you're trying to check a lot of those boxes. You talked about how you're trying to save the ownership structure money. You're trying to put more money back into the employee's thing. You're trying to be compliant. You're trying to meet a cultural demand. I immediately thought of, when you were talking about the hybrid, of, okay, what if all your technicians stayed in company vehicles, but yet all your salespeople went to a favr approach, where you have the telematics plus. I mean, I know you'd want to see everyone go over, but I got a feeling that you probably have had some clients that go, hey, Lee, we want to keep our core fleet here, but anyone like admin, anything that's truly on the SG&A of your financials, you guys might be a perfect match for us. Is that am I kind of trying to take a different just slice of the pie here of describing what you guys are trying to do?
No, that's a really great summary. So, some people, the biggest misconception about a reimbursement model is that it's to do one thing, or it's to save costs, or it's to make people happy, or it's to whatever. It's a strategy. Like, we didn't invent it; the IRS invented it, right? But you're so right. Every company's going to operate differently, and your goals are going to be different, and that's what it should be, right? Like, that's perfect. So you're right. Like, if a company says, "Look, we need to look at these departments differently because of this internal goal," or we want to, make sure that at the forefront of our program, liability reduction is number one, or, solving procurement challenges is number one. That's great. That it depends on the company. Organizations like Cardata, who take a fully managed approach to this, are here as the stewards of that goal. Meaning, if you come to us and you say, okay, I want to pursue reimbursement for tax purposes, or I want to pursue getting out of company cars, it is our goal and our job to consult with you on your options to get you to where you want to be, to say, okay, you should build on this model because you're going to save XYZ amount and that's what you want to save. Or, you should pay this amount because this is the top tier of the industry compared to the benchmarks. And you're so right, JJ, it never looks the same twice, but that's why organizations like Cardata exist, to provide the technology to get it done, but then the service to back it up. And continue to serve that year over year. And if that next year means generative AI to help create rates, then that's something that we'll look at for sure.
Yeah, thanks. That last sentence kind of brought it all together, where someone listening could go, oh, okay, now I see. Lee, we always try to ask this question in kind of a roundabout way, is what are your biggest challenges in your space? Like, what is Cardata? Where are the encumbrances? Where are those roadblocks that you guys see coming, either that are there now or they are coming in the next, foreseeable future?
Yeah. It's funny. I'll scream, I guess, back to one of the things I had said previously and just echo it because it's so valid. Is it's a really niche space, like very weird space to be in. And I think if you had asked me 10 years ago what I would be doing, I probably wouldn't have told you that I was a IRS compliant vehicle programming expert. But here we are.
But it sounds so sexy though, Lee.
I know, that's what I say. I'm sure every little girl wants to be that when they grow up. But I'm really excited to do it now. And, the goal for me is to close the gap in awareness of what the heck favor is, what the heck tax-free reimbursement is, because it's so misconstrued and it's typically historically been saturated by a couple players in the space. There's like 3 of us really, who are active players. And the rest of the market is either unvended, meaning they're doing a fully taxable approach in-house, or they're doing receipt submissions or manual calculations and submissions, or they have a company car. So for me, I think the biggest roadblock and hurdle is just getting the word out there that there's a solution that really is the balance between streamlining costs, cutting costs, and paying people fairly. And I think people don't really know that intersection exists in the space, that they can actually have a fair solution. And so brand awareness for us, and not only brand awareness, but category awareness is going to be really key. So that would be, I think, JJ, the first roadblock. The second one too, is tech is getting smarter. Tech has to get better. And I think I'm proud of Cardata because we're putting in a lot of work, especially with this investment to developing our technological capabilities, and product acceleration is at the forefront of everything we're doing because we have such good base roots in service, and we have really, really, great service talent and subject matter experts internally. And so as we develop, we're going to continue to put our product and technology and advancement at the forefront and make sure that our product team's really monitoring trends of what's important for construction organizations and what's important for other teams, so that we know what to prioritize in terms of product building amongst all the noise about what's so important in tech.
Back to that branding, whether it's like if you're one of the big 3 that plays in the space, is it just, I guess I'm trying to ask a question, but I don't know how to ask it. Is it something, because there can't be monopolies and coercion and stuff like that, but at the same token, you're all trying to capture market share, but yet it seems like the 3 of you have to pull on the same spider web together to get the news out to the consumer base. So it's kind of one of those awkward juxtapositions of we have to go with our enemies only to get more market share, but how do you collaborate yet keep your own silo? It feels. Do you see what I'm getting at? I mean, as I'm listening to your story, I'm like, hey, how do you guys do this together? Because if you're, and I'll be honest, until you reached out to me, I'd heard of your name, but as far as the favr acronym and what it meant, I understand it now, but I was oblivious. I was naive. I'd never heard of it before either.
It's a consideration that we're all thinking about. It's funny.
Who's going to make the first step to go into that gray area, right?
Well, it's funny. A lot of companies might not know that they're on a favor program. They might not know that they're on a tax-free car allowance. They might just think they're on a Cardata plan. That's very common. And so in my opinion, rather, the more we close the verbiage gap and we stop gatekeeping so much information on like the verbiage, the more people are going to start understanding what it is, what the heck we do. And I think that there's been historically, before we started scaling in the market for a lot of the other organizations, there was a lot of like cards to your chest, very hush hush about how these programs work. And there wouldn't necessarily be transparent sharing about what compliance means and what rules are associated with being IRS compliant and how you can be IRS compliant and reduce your risk of taxes. Like that was very hush hush. And we want to make that not hush hush and make that very widely available public information. And I will say in the digital age, I'm seeing a lot more joint category marketing. All the players in the space are really focused right now on education of the public, like just educating people on what the heck it is that we do. And then once they're willing to make the shift to that program, we'll duke it out. And then the organizations can decipher what partner is going to assist them the most.
But it's funny you say that, and without being altruistic or whatever the word is, is you see, I don't care what vertical you're in, when you see the A players or the top 5% in any vertical, they've all taken that adage. I mean, it's not that they're giving it away, but they're also realizing that, hey, if you can copy us, knock yourself out, because here's all the information. Here's the hard work we put in. There's no get rich quick scheme out there. There just isn't. Even with all the advancements of technology, at the end of the day, you still have human capital. You still have emotion. You still have culture. You still have all those things. People are people, right, wrong, or indifferent. And so to your point, I can't emphasize that, as particularly on this podcast, that when you see the successful organizations and people driving them, most of them have taken that approach of, here it is, here's the full Monty. If I failed forward, here's my lessons, here are my mistakes, here's our successes. If you want to emulate them, copy them, make it better, then go do it, because it's, again, back to the old adage of the spider web. If you pull in one corner, the whole thing comes with it. And if you can improve your industry, and then you can capitalize on the market share within that, well, then so be it, like you said. Hey, another question came up that I was thinking about that maybe have relevance to the audience. Are there any subtle differences, since we're all in North America, are there any subtle differences in the Canadian model versus the U.S. model that the audience would maybe like to know, that are either pros and cons? And I'm not trying to bash either the U.S. or Canada. I'm looking at more from a business owner's perspective. If they're listening going, oh, Canada might have this and the U.S. might have that. Just what are the subtleties that the government allows for, if there are any?
I'm so glad you brought this up. Oh, and there are. So it's definitely worth discussing.
Then educate us, Nate.
Perfect. So despite the fact that a lot of people do not enjoy working with the IRS directly, because that typically means you're being audited, but there's some reason that you should be working with them, the IRS does have a little bit more flexible business law than in Canada, the CRA, the Canadian Revenue Agency. So to start with the IRS in its publications, in publication 463, in their favor publication, they note the strong regulations associated with being able to qualify for these programs. Typically, high mileage drivers, that's why we work particularly with construction verticals, for example, are a perfect fit. You have to drive approximately over 5,000 miles per year to qualify for a program like favor, because it does essentially reimburse for things like depreciation on your car. So they're going to say, hey, look, you didn't drive enough to fully depreciate your car. Get out of here if you're not driving enough to qualify for favor. So the IRS is a really strong regulation around favor because they invented it. They decided that, hey, people are, 70% of the U.S. workforce, I think in 2024 so far, is driving, whether it's commute or it's, from client to client. That's a long list, a big population who's driving for work. So they gave us a solution for that. Canada, on the other hand, as somebody who lives in Canada, has a little bit of a different approach. They don't necessarily recognize favor the same way because it was developed in the US. So in Canada, there's different regulations. We do have a lot of organizations actually operating a fixed and a variable model in Canada, meaning they're reimbursing ownership costs in a fixed portion and variable costs in a operating expense portion. But typically in Canada, if you're not reimbursing at the CRA rate provided every year, you have to pay tax, which is fine. It's fine. It's just a little bit of a different model. We have a lot of companies that just reimburse on the CRA rate with Cardata. So they use our technology to capture data, and then we help them with their tax reporting. But in Canada, it's a different use case for sure. It's more about effective modeling against benchmarks, making sure that you're paying people accurately and fairly for their costs of living, for example, and their costs of driving. But there's really a little bit of a less tax benefit, which makes it a little bit more juicy in the U.S.
No, good answer. Good answer. What, switching gears, Lee, what haven't I asked you that you want to just, throw it on the table? Because again, not that this is unfamiliar space for me or conversation, but as the host, I want to make sure that I'm giving you an opportunity to just kind of, for lack of better words, barf out any of the other ideas that you either have through your background or through Cardata of what the message is that you want to effectuate.
Appreciate that. I think one of the most common questions that we get is, how does it work? Very common question.
Yeah, we didn't ask that one.
Yeah. they'll say, okay,
I just glazed over the most obvious one, you know.
Yeah. No, but it's fair. Like, tax-free vehicle reimbursement, data-driven, like these are buzzwords, right? But let's break it down and make it very accessible. This is how it works, okay? Typically, there's 3 stages of pursuing an approach like this. The first is your design stage. That means you're looking at your program, or lack of program rather, and saying, what the heck do I want to accomplish? Like, what are my goals here? Who are my employees? What do they do for work? How often are they at work? What does their typical day look like? What are my industry benchmarks? Where do I want to play in my space? That's the design phase, saying, okay, what are their average behavior? How can we take that information to help build a compliant program within the IRS regulations with your expert at Cardata to say, okay, I want to pay at this. I want to be in compliance. How do I get there? That's step 1. That's program design. It always takes into account your goals, and it also always takes into account what you're coming from. So if you're coming off a fleet, it might look a little bit different if you're coming off a taxable car allowance, right? So that design phase is extremely important in your partnership and working with Cardata to help really make sure everything's smooth. Second step is capture, the capture phase. That's the mileage capture. Drivers are out there. They're using the application. They're capturing data. They're uploading their insurance. The program is running smoothly. Everything's going. They're capturing mileage data to be paid on through the rate design. And then the last step is the payment. So actually getting that payment through Cardata, actually getting a tax-free reimbursement fully through your Cardata partnership. So we do everything between program design, mileage capture, and driver payment. It's a full cycle, fully managed reimbursement solution.
That was clear and concise. On the first 2 were pretty obvious for me. The last one on the payment, are you going direct to the employer, or does it go through the payroll, whatever that is that the company's using?
Typically, we suggest for organizations to pay through us because we do have that set up and it's a part of our services. It's all included. And that's just because it really reduces the load on the organization and make sure that if your driver has a question, if your employee has a question about their payment, they can call us and not bug you. But we do have the ability to assist in integrations through pay.
And then what are the reporting mechanisms annually then? What does someone get a report, a summary? Like how does it look per annum?
Glad you asked. Cardata not only comes with the application, but there's also a cloud platform called Cardata Cloud that is fully business intelligence analytics in addition to all those lovely juicy tax reports that are required on an annual basis. So we provide a full beautiful dashboard of trends for your drivers. So who's perhaps the highest and the lowest drivers in terms of mileage, who's out of compliance and insurance, who is trending that they're not driving enough for the year to stay in favor compliance to get a tax-free reimbursement. Where are your rates sitting? How much are you spending? And then on a quarterly basis, we also generate tax reports that say, hey, look, you're still trending at 0, or you got a couple of drivers that might see a little bit of income tax for the year. And we provide that to the organization so that they can effectively apply that to the W-2 at the end of the year. And boom, very, very streamlined, very simple.
So if people want to reach out to you or investigate this further, what are the natural steps and progression for reaching out to you or anyone else at Cardata?
Thanks, JJ. Yeah, I would encourage organizations who are interested to visit us at cardata.co. That's cardata.co. And start to read. Our blog is very robust. There's a lot of construction resources on there, actually, with some trends and some use cases that can be explored. But if you're interested in discussing, click that book a demo or speak to an expert button and reach out. I also am personally always available. I'm on LinkedIn. My name is Lee Adam or Lee Faith Adam on LinkedIn. Feel free to shoot me a message and I'm happy to connect you with the best person to help you navigate through your journey. If you're just wanting to chat and explore your options, we're always here.
Well, Lee, unless you've got anything else, I just wanted to, we're almost blew through an hour, if you can believe it. Just wanted to thank you for coming on, explaining about the vertical itself, more about Cardata, what you guys have done, what you're doing. And I think it's a very interesting topic that a lot of companies probably are not aware of. So if we've done anything through this podcast, it's what we were talked about is awareness, and exposure, so that people can look under the hood and find out if any of this is applicable and appropriate for their own growth and their own efficiencies and things like that. So with that, thank you again. And a reminder to the audience that we have a quasi-sponsorship with Red Team and Service Titan, two of our software providers in the construction space. So as you see releases and posts of this come out, please entertain the links that are there and see if they're an appropriate provider for you as well. With that, Lee, thank you very much, and glad you could join us today.
Me too. Thanks, JJ. Appreciate it.
You've been listening to the Mac and Blue Show, brought to you by Blue Wave General Contracting. Be sure to subscribe to the Mac and Blue podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Follow JJ Levensky on LinkedIn and Instagram. Tune in every Monday